Hey, Barner, relax. You only owe Gus Malzahn $35 more million before you can get rid of him. Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live for you on LouTube today. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And two, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Sometimes they're even watchable. That distinction is left up to you, the viewer. Let me know down below at the end of this video. Watchable or not watchable? Yeah, shout out to Kyle P. He suggested today's video, which of course is the Auburn Tigers. Kyle P, thank you for supporting the channel over on the Patreon page. It really means a lot to me, so thank you. If you want to support the show, click the link down below that says support the channel. It'll take you over to the Patreon page. You can get yourself signed up. All the preview videos that I've done so far have come as suggestions from over on the Patreon page. That's how I do these every single year. Now, once I finish up the suggestions from over there, I'll be happy to do teams suggested in other places like the comment section here, email, Twitter, whatever the case. I'm going to put a link up here to a playlist that I've created. It's got all the previews that I've done so far. Make sure you check it out. Look for your team. Let me know what you think. All right, let's get on to the Auburn Tigers. Of course, Gus Malzahn, head coach there, heading into his 8th year, I believe. He's been there a while since, was it 2013, I think, was his first year. What'd they do last year? Well, I'll put it up on the screen, but I'm sure most of you know already. 9-3 in the regular season, 9-4 after a bowl loss to Minnesota. More on that in a second. The 3 regular season losses came to Florida, LSU, and UGA. Notably now, they only lost to LSU by 3 points. They actually gave LSU one of the better games LSU had all of last year. But 9-3, failed to win 10 games yet again. Fun fact, Auburn has not won 10 games in back-to-back seasons since 1988 and 1989, a long time ago. If you remember the Ohio State video from a few days ago, I mentioned that they have won 11 or more games in 8 straight years. Very impressive. Hard to believe, though, that Auburn hasn't found a way to have back-to-back 10-win seasons in, 30 years? Hard to believe. Anyway, what's Gus Malzahn done since he's been at Auburn? 9 wins last year, 8 wins, 10 wins, 8 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins, 12 wins. So, one, no 2, almost, I shorted you. 2 10-plus win seasons in his time at Auburn. His most successful season was way back in 2012, I believe, his first year there. Won the SEC, made it to the BCS title game, had a huge lead against, or it might have been 2013. Anyway, it was 2013. Had a huge lead against Florida State at halftime, blew it, ended up losing. They won the division one other time back in 2017 before losing in the SEC title game to Georgia. I mentioned their bowl loss to Minnesota a few minutes ago. In Gus Malzahn's 8 years in Auburn, only 2 bowl wins. So they've really struggled in the postseason, and they've had some memorable losses, most notably Central Florida in the Peach Bowl a couple of seasons ago. But they only have 2 bowl wins, that being the Birmingham Bowl and the Music City Bowl. So got to get that turned around. You got to start winning some postseason games. No back-to-back 10-win seasons since 88 and 89. Like I said, Gus Malzahn yet to be able to correct that. 2 10-win seasons in his time at the barn. Let's take a look at recruiting. This is something I like to do for every single team. I like to look at the last 4 years recruiting classes. Generally speaking, that's what makes up the current roster of a team. I know there's 5th-year seniors and in some cases even 6-year seniors. Plus you got players that transfer out, players transfer in, injuries, kicked off the team, quit the team. Right? Booby Whitlow fans. But in any case, the last 4 recruiting classes is generally what makes up a current team's roster. Let's see what type of talent Auburn is working with. Now, the most recent class, 2020, 7th in the nation. That's impressive. And this is the problem within the SEC. That was only good for 5th in the SEC. So 7th in the nation overall in recruiting put them 5th in the SEC. Recruiting is an absolute bloodbath within the SEC. Now, Auburn has excelled in recruiting, especially at key position groups like defensive line, which we're also going to talk more about in a minute. So 7th in the nation, 5th in the SEC in 20. Go back a year before that to 19, 11th in the nation, 6th in the SEC. In 2018, they were 12th in the nation, 3rd in the SEC. In 2017, they were 9th in the nation, 4th in the SEC. Again, these are the recruiting rankings according to 24/7 Sports for the last 4 cycles. I'm not here to tell you that 24/7 Sports is the best recruiting service out there or whatever. I just always use them for consistency's sake, so I don't have to worry about trying to remember which recruiting service I used when I quoted something last week or whatever. I always use 24/7. If you want to look up some of the other ones, you're more than welcome. Let's take a look at Auburn's offense for 2020. Who's coming back? Who'd they lose? How different is it going to be? Is it going to be different at all? Let's take a look. Now, biggest change, really, Chad Morris, fired from Arkansas as head coach after 2 very unsuccessful seasons there. He did have some success at, I believe it was SMU, right, before Arkansas. Never really worked out at Arkansas, wasn't really a good fit. Gus Malzahn brings him on as offensive coordinator. Now, Auburn has had or Gus Malzahn in particular has had sort of an interesting, I guess is the right word to use, relationship with offensive coordinators in his time at Auburn. Seems to be a pattern at Auburn with Gus Malzahn. They will struggle offensively. He will blame the offensive coordinator and fire the offensive coordinator. And then he will give a speech saying he's going to be the offensive coordinator. He's going to call the plays now. He'll fix everything. Sometimes that works a little. Eventually it doesn't. He comes out and says, you know what I'm going to do to fix the problem? I'm going to hire an offensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator comes in. Sometimes it works for a little while. Sometimes it doesn't. When things go bad, what does he do? He blames the offensive coordinator, fires him, gives a speech saying he's now going to call the plays. This has been a cycle at Auburn over the last 6 or 7 years. It's continuing now, bringing in Chad Morris. More good news, if you call it that. No, all jokes aside. Quarterback Bo Nix returns after starting the entire season last year as a true freshman. This time last year, everybody was debating Bo Nix versus Joey Gatewood. Bo Nix got the call. Had some games where he looked really, really good. Had some games where he looked like a freshman quarterback. And that's very typical of any freshman quarterback. That's not a knock on Bo Nix. You look at the first game of the year, Oregon drove Auburn down the field in the final minutes of that game to the winning touchdown drive. I'm not going to talk about the final touchdown pass. My thoughts on that are well known. He shouldn't have made that throw, but it was caught, and he's a hero. That's all that matters. So, give him credit. Drove down the field, get the big win against Oregon. And then, of course, he beat Alabama. I don't care who you are. If you're the quarterback of Auburn and you beat Alabama, that makes people happy. But then you look at the LSU and Florida game. Those 2 games combined, he only completed 40% of his passes, and he had 4 interceptions in those 2 games. And, of course, both of those games were losses, and Auburn really struggled to score late in the season against Georgia. I believe they only scored 14 in that game. So up and down season for Bo Nix. But, again, that's to be expected by a true freshman quarterback, no matter how talented you may or may not be. He comes back. You have to assume with a year of experience, he's going to be at least a little bit improved in every area of the game. Now, no offseason workouts, no spring practice. Maybe that slowed that down a little bit, but that's going to be the case for every team this year, right? So hard to really use that as an excuse for Auburn, but you do get your quarterback back, Bo Nix. Offensive line, not so lucky. You lose all 5 starters from your offensive line from last year. Now, you did have a center that started 5 games last year. He's back. But all 5 primary starters from the offensive line are gone. Outside of that center, you got to replace the other 4 guys. You got a couple of guys I think are almost guaranteed to start. What's this guy's name? Axton Troxell or Taxel, whatever his name is. Anyway, you got a couple of, you look at the recruiting. You've recruited well. So you've got some talent to replace those pieces on the offensive line, but very inexperienced. It's going to be an area of concern, I think, for Auburn all season long. It's going to be the offensive line, particularly early in the season. No off-season program. The offensive line really hasn't had a chance to gel as a unit. And even under normal conditions and normal circumstances, a normal off-season, an offensive line really needs game time to gel as a unit. An offensive line can have 5 great individual pieces. Until they learn to play together as a unit, it's hard for them to play up to their potential. This is a issue that Georgia, in my opinion, is going to struggle with early in the season this year, too. They're also replacing the majority of their offensive line. Not that Georgia's offensive line isn't good or can't be good. Not that Auburn's offensive line isn't good or can't be good. But the inexperience, the learning to play as a unit, that's something that's going to take time, and I don't think can be you can't replicate what you'll learn in a game in a practice environment. So it's just something to keep an eye on, especially early in the season, the lack of experience on Auburn's offensive line. Running back, I think, is another possible concern for Auburn. Now, first of all, let's talk about some incoming freshmen, particularly Tank Bigsby. I'm high on Tank Bigsby. I think the guy can be a legit elite college football running back. Can he be an elite college football running back behind this year's Auburn offensive line as a true freshman? I don't know. Boobie Whitlow, who would have been the starter this year, quit the team. He's gone, no longer with Auburn. That leaves you really with only DJ Williams returning in terms of significant contributions made to Auburn's run game last year. You do get him back. After that, you've got a couple of sophomore and juniors, but I'm just not that high on them. Now, they may play early in the season ahead of the two freshmen, but I think the two freshmen, Tank Bigsby in particular, the other one's name is, was it Mark Anthony Richards, I believe it is. They're talented too. They will probably see the field a lot this season. We'll see. But running back, again, lack of experience, a concern if you're Auburn at the running back position. And Gus Malzahn has a habit, unfortunately, of sort of picking one running back that he thinks is the best and then just running that guy into the ground. We've seen him do it year after year after year. Several years in a row, Auburn's starting running back was unable to make it at the end of the year because he was just worn out. You need a running back by committee approach in the SEC. Even if you have a main guy, a true starter, a true number one running back, you need a couple of guys behind him. You cannot, these aren't the old days of handing the ball off to Bo Jackson or Herschel Walker 35 times every single game of the year and getting wins. It just doesn't work that way anymore. You got to have running backs that you can swap in and out of the game. We'll see how this works out for Auburn, but some young guys I think are going to get a lot of chances this year in Auburn's backfield. Now, wide receiver, to me, the strong suit of your offense. I do think Bo Nix has a lot of potential. We'll see if it pans out. The wide receiver potential has already panned out, and you may have the best 1-2 wide receiver combo in the SEC, and that's really saying something. When you look at LSU's wide receiver core, Florida's wide receiver core, even Ole Miss has got some studs. Georgia's got George Pickens, but really nobody proven to go along with him. But you've got these two guys, Seth Williams and Anthony Swartz. Of course, Anthony Swartz is not only the fastest player in the SEC, probably the fastest player in all of college football. He wins gold medals at track meets all the time. He's an absolute burner, a guy that can take the ball to the house from anywhere on the field on any given play. An exciting player to watch. A little disappointing last year. I don't know whether that was a play calling issue, a design issue, a Bo Nix issue, but he didn't really have the amount of big plays last year that I thought he would have. We'll see if he can turn that around this year. One guy that didn't struggle last year, the guy you'll have opposite him, Seth Williams, 830 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. Bo Nix, for whatever reason, has developed really good chemistry with this guy. He's back. You have to assume these numbers are only going to increase in Bo Nix's second year. Again, 830 yards last year with 8 touchdowns. Look for more out of Seth Williams this year, a true elite number one wide receiver. Is he as good as, say, a Jamar Chase at LSU? Probably not. But again, when you look at 1-2 combos, right, these two guys, Williams and Swartz, in my opinion, are as good or better than any 1-2 combo within the SEC. A lot of potential here at the wide receiver position for Auburn. All right, let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball and see what's going on over there. Defensive line, Auburn's strong suit, really as long as anyone can remember, at least the last 3, 4, 5 years. Losing Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson is going to hurt, period. Auburn has recruited really well along the defensive line. In fact, a lot of the players on the defensive line that Georgia has targeted in recruiting over the last few cycles have ended up at Auburn. Same as that. I mean, that's the case with Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson and some of the guys you got coming back this year. But those two guys were absolutely unbelievable. They're both in the NFL now. They're gone. I don't think you have two guys as good as them. You've got some good guys. You're very, very talented. Probably the best defensive line in the SEC last year. And kind of like with a running back position, teams play a lot of defensive linemen now. So you've got a lot of experience along the defensive line, even though you lose those two starters, led, of course, by Big Cat Bryant and Tyrone, what's this guy's name? Tyrone Truesdell, I think it is. Both of these guys, really, really good. Again, are they Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson? Probably not. They still might be two of the best defensive tackles in the SEC. We'll see. They have a ton of potential on Auburn's defensive line. I'm not that concerned about Auburn's defensive line. Even if it's not quite as good as it was last year, still should be really, really good. Derek Hall, he could have a breakout year. You got a couple of guys to keep an eye on. Now, linebacker's probably your strong suit, in my opinion, on defense. You do get some playmakers back at that position. KJ Britt, 69 tackles, 10 tackles for loss last year. First team All-SEC. You have to assume he's going to be even better this year. And then on the outside, you got Popo and is it McClown? Whatever. I'm probably saying the second guy's name wrong. But Owen Papo, everybody wanted this guy, Georgia included. He's an absolute beast. I expect him to have a breakout year this year. He could put up some serious numbers. Auburn's got him playing in sort of an outside linebacker position, and I expect him to have a really, really good year this year. So with him on the outside and KJ Britt in the middle, Auburn's linebacker unit, probably the best unit on defense that Auburn has out of the three levels, defensive front, linebacker, and defensive back. I like your linebackers probably the most. Defensive backs is sort of an offensive line situation. You lose almost all your starters from last year's defensive backfield. Both your starting corners are gone. Two of your safeties are gone. Now, you've got some talent. You've got some guys. Smoke Monday. Can we get a shout out for this guy just because of his name? His safety, Smoke Monday. Now, he played a lot last year, and Roger McCreary, I think is the other guy's name at corner, who played a lot last year. I mean, teams play 4 and 5 corners. You got nickel packages, dime packages. You guys know the deal. So you say, well, you lose your 4 starting DBs. Yeah, that's true, but you play 6, 7 DBs a game. So again, it's not like we're talking about players who aren't talented or who have no experience at all. Clearly, these guys have experience. They played a lot last year. Both will play a lot more this year, but I still think Auburn's defensive secondary not going to be as good as it was last year for no other reason, experience. So I think Auburn's got some work to do in the defensive secondary. I think Auburn's got some work to do along the offensive line. They can get those two things figured out. I think they have the potential for a really good season. If they can't, if the offensive line causes the run game to grind to a halt and you're looking at Bo Nix to win you games week in and week out, you're probably looking at a season similar to what you saw last year, in my opinion. Let's throw the schedule up on the screen and try to figure out what that record might be. All right, here we go. I'm going to give the same disclaimer I've been giving in every one of these videos. I have no idea what the college football schedule is going to end up looking like this year by the time the season actually starts. The number of different possibilities and scenarios at this point is endless. I am not going to try to guess what might happen, at least not for the purposes of these prediction videos. When I make a prediction video, I make the predictions based on the information that we know today. And as of today, the SEC has canceled no games. No non-con games have been canceled. No games have been rearranged. Nothing has been announced to start the season late or early or condense the season, conference games only. None of that has been officially announced yet at this point. So I'm going to do this Auburn game-by-game prediction based off of their regular season schedule. So here we go. You start things off at home against Alcorn State. That's a win. I mean, they're a lower classification team, so it's no disrespect intended to Alcorn State, but they don't have any business competing with Auburn, and Auburn should get the win easily. Now, week 2, this is tricky. Atlanta against North Carolina. North Carolina is one of the hottest teams right now in terms of recruiting. Now, of course, that's not going to help them this year, but they're a trendy pick, not necessarily to win the ACC because you got Clemson over there. They're a trendy pick to be a really good team this year. Year 2 under Mac Brown, they exceeded expectations in year 1, in my opinion. A lot of close losses, but a lot of close wins too. But they're another team that played a true freshman quarterback last year, Sam Howell. He's in year 2. This will be a great. Are these the 2 best sophomore quarterbacks in the Power 5? Bo Nix and Sam Howell. Not sure if they're the 2 best, but they are 2 of the more well-known and 2 of the more experienced sophomore quarterbacks in the Power 5. Both started all season as a freshman. Both of them now heading into year 2. Expectations very high for both of them. This will be a great game. Gus Malzahn versus Mac Brown. ACC versus SEC. Auburn versus North Carolina. Bo Nix versus Sam Howell. I think this will be an interesting, entertaining game. There's a handful of games that you're like, man, if they go to conference only, it's really going to suck not being able to see these games, right? Ohio State and Oregon. There's a few on the list. I think Auburn, North Carolina is one of those games. It's really going to be bad if we don't get to see that. I'm hoping that we do. It's a neutral site game played in Atlanta, part of the Chick-fil-A Kickoff Classic, which lasts 2 weeks this year. You got a game week 1 Saturday, week 1 Monday. Then you got this game week 2 on Saturday, neutral site game. I think Auburn gets the win. Now, this wasn't easy for me to decide. Usually, Auburn versus North Carolina, I'd be leaning Auburn, and I wouldn't have to put that much thought into it. I'm kind of buying the hype on North Carolina, but I'm skeptical. I keep hearing, and I get it, that, oh, yeah, we lost 6 games, but 4 of them were by 6 points or less. And I get that, and that is sort of a reason to be optimistic. But almost all their wins were by 6 points or less, too. So if you're going to tell me you almost won 10 you also got to tell me you almost won 2. Okay, so I don't know. And I have, outside of Sam Howell, I've got some other questions about North Carolina. Now, next year, they may be able to compete with Clemson next year. They may be that good next year. I don't know how good they're going to be this year. This game's early in the season. A little bit of unknowns on both teams. I'm going to go with who I think just has the most overall talent, and that's Auburn. I think Auburn starts the season 2-0, although I do think that'll be a good game against North Carolina. Then you have your first SEC game of the season on the road at Ole Miss. Of course, they brought in Lane Kiffin as head coach. I don't know if it's a controversial move, definitely a risky move. I think he's not really proven, at least not in the Power 5. He didn't do that well at Tennessee. He didn't do that well at Southern Cal. He's been down in Florida at a Group of 5 team, head coach for a while prior to that. Ran the offense at Alabama for a couple of years. So he's had some ups and downs in his college coaching career. Gets another shot now in the Power 5, this time in the SEC West at Ole Miss. And Ole Miss does have some talent. They've got some receiver talent. He's got a couple of quarterbacks there that I think he can work with. You may see a quarterback rotation at Ole Miss. You have to play them there. I don't think Ole Miss is good enough to win 9 or 10 games. I don't think Ole Miss is good enough to win the SEC West. I do think Ole Miss is good enough, and I do think Lane Kiffin is a good enough head coach that Ole Miss can beat somebody they're not supposed to beat. You know, whether that's Auburn, Bama, LSU, Texas A&M, they host Florida. Now, I've done a lot of these previews already, and I've done a Florida preview. I picked them to beat Florida. Florida's got to travel to Ole Miss after they play LSU. I think Ole Miss gets that win. That's a little later in the season. New coaching staff at Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss will be better as the season goes along. I think you get the win early in the season on the road at Ole Miss. You're 3-0. Then you come back home for another non-con game, this time against Southern Miss. Better competition than Alcorn State. Not better enough to be competing with the Barn. I think Auburn wins that one. You're 4-0. Now you got a couple of games in a row here against SEC East teams. First, you host Kentucky. Kentucky's a lot better than what people think they are. People think Kentucky is a 5-win team every year. They just think they are. They don't give them any respect or credit. They don't spend any time looking into what Kentucky has or anything. They just see the name Kentucky and they write it off. Now, in most years, you'd be right to do that. Right now, they're in a pretty good spot at Kentucky. They've got to get better consistency out of the quarterback position. Last year, they ended up playing Bowden, a wide receiver, at the quarterback position for the second half of the year because they were just decimated by injuries. They get those guys back this year. They got touchdown Terry Wilson coming back to run the offense. I like some of their pieces on defense. To me, Kentucky is a lot like Ole Miss, but in the East. Kentucky's a good team. They've got some talent. They can probably beat somebody that they're not supposed to beat. Are they going to win 10 games? Probably not. Are they winning the East? No. But they're going to beat somebody. That somebody is Auburn. I actually think you lose to Kentucky at home. I think Kentucky beats you. I know you're going to disagree with that. You're going to be a favorite over Kentucky, probably a big favorite, 10 points, 13 points, somewhere in that range. Weird things happen in college football all the time. I'm not going to argue with you if you tell me there's no way Auburn loses to Kentucky. Clearly, Auburn should beat Kentucky. But we see weird things happen. It's no fun just to pick the favorite in every single game. That rarely happens in a college football season. If the favorite won every single time, you'd have lost to Alabama last year, wouldn't you? Yeah, you would. So point is, anything can happen. I think you take the L at home to Kentucky. Then you got to go on the road and play Georgia. Now, this is a great example of be careful what you wish for. Auburn man cried and cried and cried to the SEC about their schedule and how unfair it was. They've played Georgia the end of November for eons, right? They Georgia, then either an off week or an FCS team, and then Bama. That's been their last 3 games of the season, year after year after year after year after year, in what seems like forever. Georgia, a nobody, and then Bama. They complained to the SEC office. It's not fair that we have to play Georgia and Alabama, to close the season every year. It's not fair. It's not fair. Cry, 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 cry. Finally, the SEC office gives in and say, okay, fine, we'll move you up and play Georgia in the middle of the season. This is when Georgia would normally be playing Tennessee. The Tennessee game got moved on Georgia's schedule to the back end where Auburn normally is. So now you get Georgia in the middle of the season. You got to travel to Athens to play them. You've beat Georgia, 3 times this century? I don't even remember the last time you beat them in Athens. It's been a long time. Georgia has had your number. I think we're 12-3 against you actually in the last 15 years. We've just dominated Auburn. Careful what you wish for. You're losing on the road in Athens. They've just had your number for whatever reasons. A couple of the games have been close. You even beat Georgia 3 seasons ago, 2017, at home. before losing to them 3 weeks later in the SEC title game. But I think Georgia gets the win at home. You catch back-to-back losses here, both against the SEC East, Kentucky at home, and UGA on the road. And more on your crying about the schedule when we get to the end of this schedule. And you can already see it up there now. But listen, you cried and this is what they gave you. I can't wait to get to that part of the schedule. But I digress before I regress. Then you host Texas A&M. Texas A&M's another weird team. They've got some talent, but for some reason, they lose to the 5 best teams on their schedule, it seems like every single year, right? Happened last year, 7-5. What do they tell you? Yeah, but the best 7-5 team in America. Our 5 losses were all the really good teams ranked in the top 15. Breaking news. If you want to be a good team, you got to beat teams ranked in the top 15, especially when you're playing in the SEC. You know you're going to play several of those teams every year. So you look at Texas A&M, they played 5 good teams last year. Georgia, Clemson, Auburn, LSU, and Alabama. Lost to them all. It's hard for me to buy into Texas A&M. As talented as they are, and they are talented. And listen, people forget about Jimbo Fisher. It's not easy to win a national title. Now, I'm no Jimbo Fisher fan. He had a loaded team at Florida State. All 22 of his starters from his national title team ended up getting drafted. So he had an absolutely loaded team, but still undefeated and won a national title and had a Heisman winning QB. I don't think you can just write that off as if it didn't happen. So Texas A&M has some potential. I'm just tired of picking that potential just to be let down every single time they play a good team. I think you rebound from your 2 losses to the SEC East and get a win at home against Texas A&M. That takes you into your bye week. You come out of that, you got to go on the road and play Mississippi State, another team with a brand new coaching staff. Bigfoot, Mike Leach down from Washington State by way of Texas Tech prior to that. I don't think Mississippi State, talent-wise, is in as good of a position as Ole Miss is. So I think Lane Kiffin takes over a better situation than Bigfoot does. With that being said, it is very interesting to me to see what Bigfoot does in the SEC. He's had some wild offenses over the years, dating back to his days at Texas Tech and even more recently at Washington State. A lot of spread you out and air it out type of stuff. We'll see if that's what he decides to go with in the SEC. It's been a while since anyone really tried that approach in the SEC. You go back to Steve Spurrier's fun and gun days. We'll see if this works out. I just don't know that Mississippi State has the talent there right now, no matter how good of a coach Mike Leach might be, for him to take advantage of it and win some big games. I think you get a win on the road at Mississippi State. Then you host Arkansas, worst team in the SEC, possibly the worst team in the Power 5 last year, another team with a new coaching staff, Sam Pittman. I like Sam Pittman, greatest offensive line coach in all of college football in my opinion, but he's never been a coordinator and he's never been a head coach, and he takes over the least talented team in the SEC. In the most difficult division in all of college football, the SEC West. Going to be a long year for Arkansas. Sam Pittman, we may look back 10 years from now and go, you know what? Sam Pittman was one of the best 5 or 6 coaches of all time. Maybe, but it won't be because of anything he does this year. It's going to be another long year for the Razorbacks. You get the win at home against Arky. Then you got a non-con game, UMass. You'll win that one without a problem. And now look at this. You cried to the LSU or to the SEC office about having to play Georgia, a nobody, and Bama. And what do? They stick you with back-to-back games to close out your season against LSU and Alabama. Congratulations. You got what you wished for. Enjoy it. You're losing to both of those teams. Add that to the fact that you're losing to Georgia earlier in the year, and all your crying did for you was get you 3 giant L's. That's it. Just have a good morning.